All right, let's get started adding our CSS to our document. So what I need to stress here is it's going to be difficult to go through these requirements one at a time because they're all sort of linked together. But I'm going to try to stay on task as far as the concept, which we'll be covering, and then of course some of the properties and property values which we'll be working with will start to will overlap. Okay, but let's start with the use of element selectors, and we'll use tags, ID selectors, and class selectors. All right, so let's get at it. So we're going to begin by targeting the H1 element, which is our name. All right, so we're going to go over to the CSS and we are going to literally type in H1. H1 is a tag selector. So some people like to think of the selector as the hook. Okay, so in this case H1 and this H1, that is the hook or the link of how we have our CSS styles attach themselves to the HTML element, to an ID, which is an identifier, or a class, which we can use. Okay, so we're using the actual H1 element as our selector. So the next part here is we will add an opening and a closing curly brace, and we'll add a space. Now people style their CSS differently. I tend to do my styles stacked up where each property and property value are on their own individual line. It's just easier to see the code, especially if you're new to this. All right, so what we're going to do first is we are going to change. So if I save and I take a look at my page in the live preview, I'll see the default font, and the default font is a serif font. Okay, so I'm going to change that, and we're going to do that by using the font family property. So we'll type in font family colon, and then most Mac OS and Windows operating systems will have some of the same base fonts, and you have to use fonts that are in the user's operating system. If you use a really cool font which you like and it's not in their operating system, then your page will, the type on your page will default to whatever is a default they have. Okay, it won't display correctly if they do not have the font. And we're going to look at something here in a little bit as far as how we can have a custom font on our page. All right, but for right now, let's just use Verdana, which is a basic sans serif font, which should be in both of those operating systems I mentioned. And then just in case, what we're going to do is add a comma. So we're creating a list here. So we're asking for Verdana as the font family first. And if you haven't already noticed, I spelt font wrong. Okay, so font family, that would have off to a great start, spelling things wrong. All right, so font family, Verdana. If Verdana is not available, then I'm going to load whatever is the default sans serif font for their operating system. Okay, so let's go ahead and save, and then we're going to go to our preview page here and update the page, and we'll see that our H1 has in fact updated. Okay, all right, so let's go back to our pen and we see that we have used the H1 selector. Now we could also do something like this. H1 is inside of the element header. So if we come over here and type in header and we add a space, what we're doing is creating a compound. what we're saying is now the element header, which has h1 inside, is going to get this. Okay? So it's a compound where we have elements and we're drilling down to those elements in order. So if we save and we preview, all right, so everything should look the same, and it does. All right, let's take a step back here. And on the H1, I'm going to add a space after the 1, and then ID equals, and IDs are user defined. So you make them up. But the best thing to do is make up a name for your ID which is meaningful. Okay, so this is a headline. This is main headline. So if we did main headline, well, that makes sense. All right, banana wouldn't make sense. Maybe to some people, but not to me. Okay, and probably not to a machine that's trying to understand the purpose of this headline. So we're going to have an ID of main headline. Now, what's important is use a naming convention. Never use spaces or never leave spaces. Remember, stay with the naming convention with a hyphen, with an underscore, or some people prefer to capitalize beginning with the second word. All right? I tend to use hyphens. Now, the other important thing here is do not begin IDs with a number. All right? Just don't do it. All right, so now we have our H1 and we've assigned an ID. So what I'm going to do is come over here and change the selector from H1 or header H1 to our ID main headline. And we do so by first adding the pound sign. Okay, some people like to say hashtag. So I say pound sign. And then the actual name. So main headline, like so. And we will save. And we'll go ahead and update. And you'll see that everything has stayed the same. That is because now we're using ID as our link, as our selector. Okay? And IDs begin with the pound sign in our CSS. Okay, we can also use what are called classes. Now remember, IDs, identifiers, we use them once, and they have another purpose which we'll talk about later. So we could change our attribute to class, okay, in our H1. And now, over here in our CSS, we will do, matter of fact, I'll make it really easy. I won't select the whole thing. We're just going to change the pound sign to a period or a dot. So now our hook, our selector, is a class. Our class name, we kept main headline, and now we have dot main headline as our selector. So we'll save and we will preview, and again, if we update the page, everything should stay the same. All right, so selectors can be tags, they can be compound tags, meaning more than one in a row. We can use IDs, which are also known as identifiers, and we can use classes to target our styles.